The second chapter of the Gospel of Matthew contains a story not found in any of the other Gospels. The story tells us that after the birth of Jesus, his parents had to flee with their child to Egypt. King Herod has heard about a child who will one day be king, so Herod decides that Jesus must be found and murdered. But not knowing exactly where Jesus is, Herod unleashes horrific vengeance by slaughtering the children of his own people. Joseph, Mary, and baby Jesus escape to Egypt, where they live until King Herod dies. In today's world, Jesus and his family would be considered refugees. The legal definition of a refugee is a person who, quote, flees from his or her own country to seek refuge elsewhere because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, end quote. According to the Pew Research Center, children and families make up an increasing share of asylum seekers here in the U.S. Many are fleeing credible threats of gang violence, political persecution, and extreme poverty. And according to Track Immigration, that's TRAC, Track Immigration figures from July of this year, 2025, the current U.S. asylum case backlog is 2 million cases, 2 million, leaving many in prolonged uncertainty. Finally, according to the 2023 UNICEF report, nearly half of the entire world's 42.7 million refugees are children. That's 21 million children if you're doing the math. 21 million children worldwide who are refugees. In chapter 25 of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus declares that the righteous shall be separated from the unrighteous, not by doctrine or dogma, but by their treatment of the most vulnerable among us. Jesus defines the vulnerable as the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, and the imprisoned. But Jesus doesn't stop there. He goes on to identify himself with these groups, saying, I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, sick, and imprisoned. In today's world, that stranger may be an asylum-seeking mother crossing the desert with her child. It may be a refugee fleeing war and waiting at the border. It may be a man held in an immigration detention center without legal representation. Jesus makes it clear, to welcome them is to welcome Christ. To ignore them is to reject him. Jesus doesn't ask whether they came with documents or not. Jesus asks whether they were received with dignity. There are so many ways we can offer welcome. In one of the previous churches I served, a church member who was also a first-generation immigrant shared with me that her brother had tragically and suddenly died back in her home country. And because she had been waiting for a number of years for her green card approval, she was unable to leave our country and attend his funeral. Now, let me just explain that for just a moment. It's not that she couldn't leave, it's that if she left, she probably wouldn't be able to come back. These were the days before Zoom and FaceTime, so there was no way for her to be present even remotely at her brother's funeral. And as you can imagine, her grief was compounded by being away, unable to attend her own brother's funeral, and she shared her feelings and heartbreak with me and some other members of the church. She felt so very sad. Tears flowed from her eyes down her cheeks, and she said, "I feel so very alone." As we listened to her, one of the church members said, "Well, what if we helped you to host a memorial service right here for your brother?" And the woman's eyes filled again with tears, this time not because of sadness, but because she felt so loved and cared for. The service ended up being held in her home. It's a service I will never forget. And as so many community and church people filled her house, we sang, we prayed, we celebrated her brother's life in multiple languages. We shared food and laughter, and together we helped show this woman that she was not alone. We couldn't change the fact that she couldn't get her green card expedited, but we could be the family of God with her and help her in this moment of grief and loss. And these actions of hospitality made a difference to her broken heart. As we continue to explore a biblical perspective on immigration through this worship series, Matthew's gospel places a holy demand on the church to reorient our response to immigration. As we've said in previous weeks in this series, our response to immigration is a deeply spiritual matter, not just political. This passage reminds us that in the faces of migrants and refugees, we meet the living God. Matthew 25 asks us, how are we responding to the migrants in our midst? Are we acting as sheep who see Christ in the stranger, or goats who look away? From Genesis to Exodus, all the way to the New Testament book of Hebrews, the Bible calls us to love our neighbors, and in particular to welcome the sojourner, the stranger, the foreigner among us. Immigrant and migrant and refugee stories fill the pages of our scriptures and include Abraham and Sarah, Hagar, Joseph, Ruth and Naomi, Jesus and his parents. The New Testament book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verses 1 through 2, puts it this way: keep loving each other like family. Don't neglect to open up your homes to guests, because by doing this, some have been hosts to angels without knowing it. Jesus often comes to us in disguise, as he himself says in Matthew 25, a hungry person, a thirsty person, an immigrant, a prisoner. In her book, The God Who Sees, theologian and Guatemalan immigrant Karen Gonzalez writes, we don't show hospitality to be like Jesus. We show hospitality to welcome Jesus. And the question is not whether God will see and hear and welcome us. The question is whether we will see and hear and welcome God. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. Whatever you do to the least of these, you also do to me. The question is, will we live out the radical and subversive hospitality that Jesus modeled for us? Back in the 1980s, many churches across the United States joined the sanctuary movement. The sanctuary movement happened when churches offered safe refuge to Central American immigrants fleeing the U.S.-backed wars and violence. Declaring their churches as sanctuaries, these communities lived out Matthew 25 by choosing divine law over unjust human laws. Today, many churches are reviving this witness, providing shelter, legal assistance, and advocating for families facing deportation and indefinite detention. Faith communities are stepping in where governments have failed, insisting that God's justice prioritizes the vulnerable, not the powerful. 3 of the 4 slides, including this one that I've shown as part of the sermon today, come from artist Kelly Lattimore. Kelly Lattimore grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and he paints in icons. Icons are a kind of figure that's most prominently used in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Lattimore calls his icons windows to God. He emphasizes that as an artist, he must pay attention, and that all of us must practice seeing. Kelly's icons help us to see, to engage in what he calls holy pondering. He also challenges us not just to see, but to become ourselves living icons, acting for peace and justice in this needy world. In an interview about the first picture I showed you, his Holy Family as refugee icons, Kelly Lattimore was asked what moved him to start depicting immigrants in his icons. He shared that he and his partner had met a young undocumented man from Guatemala around the bonfire one night and heard his story of why he came to the United States, his hopes, his fears, his dreams, what he saw on his way. Lattimore found the story profound and heart-wrenching. Lattimore went on to say in that interview, in the era before the 2016 election, you could just kind of tell what was coming, that the country, and unfortunately, a lot of Christians, were becoming very anti-immigrant and anti-stranger. Lattimore went on to say, I was thinking about this young man that we met and how he was vilified. All these issues in our country are not issues, they are people with names and faces and stories. His experience immediately made us think of the Holy Family fleeing as refugees. Most of these people that come into our country are possibly having the same feelings and emotions that Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were having 2,000 years ago. So it's trying to use the metaphors I had in the church to create dialogue about it. From scriptures to art, from the experience of Jesus and his family, we are called to welcome the stranger, because when we do so, we welcome Christ himself. We welcome God, who takes the form of the most vulnerable and calls on all of us to care. Each week in this series, we are suggesting some actions for you to take, to consider taking. Last week, we encouraged you to watch the movie Under the Same Moon. It's available to rent on Amazon Prime, or if you're a Prime member, you can watch it without having to rent it. We showed the movie here and had discussion. This week, we invite you to do 2 things. The first is to take these verses from Matthew 25 and read them to yourself each day this coming week. As you read, and the words, reflect especially on what the words are saying to you in the context of the times we're living, and especially in the context of immigration justice. And the second action we invite you to consider is registering for the October 9th Lunch and Learn being offered by the Michigan Annual Conference, headed up by Alice Townley, a clergy person here, and someone who attends our church along with her family. This is a 30-minute free session to look at what other churches are doing in our area and ways we might be more involved in immigration justice. The righteous will reply to him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you as a stranger and welcome you, or naked and give you clothes to wear? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will reply to them, I assure you that when you do it for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you do it for me. Amen.